Okay, I've got some adhesive here, so I'll put a little spot on the paper to work from. I'll take this patch and apply a little bit of adhesive to the edge. I don't want to put too much on there. I don't want great blobs of it running down into the body and potentially gluing up the mechanism. So I've just put a smear around the edges, and that fits into this little recess here, and press that down into place. On the base of the camera I've got these two little patches to do. These ones I can be less circumspect with because there's nothing underneath them to cause me any grief, so I'll put a bit of adhesive on there and drop that into place. And likewise its friend. There we go. Oops, that was lifted out. Get back in there. That's better. Their job is simply to keep that base plate nice and flat so the leatherettes go on smoothly. I've got to look at the condition of the leatherette from the base of the camera, see if it needs any attention, see if it's dirty or greasy or anything. It looks quite clean actually. I think I'll get away with just wiping this with a bit of naphtha. I just want to be sure I lift off any contaminants like oils or greases which would stop the leatherette from sticking properly. There's nothing really to show there. There's a bit of dust come off on that cotton bud, but nothing dramatic. So some adhesive. When you've got a bigger patch of leatherette to do, you can apply some direct to the leatherette. Like that. Then use your toothpick to ensure that it's evenly spread, particularly making sure that the edges are covered. Right, I'm satisfied that level that is nicely and evenly applied. So I can lift that off the paper. Now, here you might be able to see there's a few trails of adhesive stretching across those holes. So I'll just wipe those with the stick to remove those. Particularly the one at the end here where the back catch release goes, that's good. So while that adhesive is still very tacky, I can put this leatherette in place. Now normally I start with the back catch release button, drop it over the top of the central bush there, make sure it's firmly fitted round the rewind button bush there, and just press it in generally, make sure it's in smooth and flat. Areas of special interest around this bush in the middle here, leatherette shrinks over time as it dries out. That means it's reluctant to push over features like that bush, so it doesn't always sit as flat as you might want it at that point. Similarly round the rewind button, because the hole in the leatherette will have shrunk and it doesn't want to go around that bush easily. That's good. So my leatherette there is a good fit. I'm happy with that. That's nice and smooth, sitting flat, everything good. I can put my advance knob back on. Now I've cleaned the underside of this advance knob, but you can leave it, but you can see I haven't bothered to remove that old adhesive and stuff there yet, so I'm just going to do that. And again, I'm really only interested in removing loose adhesive and dust and dirt. Right, let's give this a little clean, remove that loose stuff. That's good, that's sufficient. And our leatherette patch is here. As before, I'll give that a wipe to remove any dust. If there were lumps of hardened adhesive on the back of that patch, I would take the opportunity to scrape them off with a scalpel at this point. But that appears good. A little bit of adhesive, and of course it doesn't take much. It doesn't take as much as that. And I'll make sure I've got an even coating over that patch to the edges. And that can be fitted to the lever. Now this leatherette does have a grain. You can see the pattern of the grain. And it's best practice if the grain all lines up with the base of the camera and on the lever. So there we have the leatherette all fitted to the camera base. And the next components to go on there are the back catch cover, its return spring, and two small screws. I'll just give these components a quick clean with naphtha. They look pretty good to me. This camera has never done much work by the looks of it, and it's been well stored, I would think, so it's not showing the common signs of corrosion that or build up of dirt or dust that they commonly do. I'll zoom you in a bit. Wrong way. To get this assembled, I've put one of the screws in place, and then I take the return spring put that into place, and the spring sort of holds it together as an assembly. Let that thing focus. Then I stick that onto the camera very carefully, hopefully not dislodging the spring. And when all goes to plan, I can run that screw in and check the action of the back catch cover, making sure that its return spring returns it smoothly. Then tighten up those two screws. And there we have it. So the base of the camera is finished with. The top of the camera is finished with. We only have our front leatherettes and of course our Kodak name patch to go. So I've got to clean up and prepare the leatherettes. Here I have the leatherettes from the front panel. So I'm using a scalpel blade to scrape any dried adhesive, lumps and bumps of corrosion or anything else I don't like off the back of the leatherette. You'll see some light patches on here. Now they'll be corrosion patches. That's where moisture got through the leatherette and caused corrosion to form on the aluminium camera body. Of course, that sort of behaviour causes the adhesive to effectively fail locally. Right, I'll just get rid of the dust. And these leatherettes need to be just given a quick wipe down with some naphtha to remove all dust, any oil, grease or similar nuisances, just to ensure that the adhesive will stick well to them. They're in very good condition as these things go, and I'm not expecting any trouble. Here we go. I will wipe the camera body both sides of the front with a bit of naphtha on a cotton bud, just to make sure that there is no grease or oil on there that may have come off my fingers mostly while I've been working on it, because those surfaces have both been cleaned down pretty thoroughly. Alright, the leatherette, you'll see it's got quite a formed curve to it from sitting on the camera all those years, so it should fit back quite well. If it was old leatherette, which was absolutely flat, it would be a problem getting it to form nicely and stay stuck, but we don't have that problem. Okay. We'll start with the larger of the two pieces. I'll apply some adhesive to the leatherette, and I can be a bit messy about that because it's a big piece, and I can spread it about, and possibly more importantly it's the first of two pieces, so any excess I've got I can transfer to my second piece of leatherette without wasting it. Making sure I've got good cover to the edges. You can see the leatherette's got a bit of a curl to that bottom edge where it possibly hasn't stuck so well in the past. Right, I'll peel that excess off there and just apply it to that one. I don't need it to be running when we put the leatherette on the camera, that's not helpful. Yeah, it's like a primer layer on that second piece of leatherette, which we'll be fitting in a minute. Right, so that's quite good. Now that adhesive's quite, it's somewhere between wet and tacky, I suppose you would say. Now I need to fit it into place. And the leatherette just tucks under the edge of that black surround around the shutter, and then tucks in along the hinge line there. So I have to make sure that that's all happened and that it's evenly applied from top to bottom. It's not uncommon for there to be a slight gap because the leatherette may have shrunk over time, and you need to get it evened up so that the gap is even top and bottom so that it's not so obvious. So that's good, that went on smoothly. Now I can deal with the second piece. I'll be a bit more sparing this time, I had a bit too much on the last one. Let's see how we get on with that. I've been too sparing, there's not enough there. You apply a bit more. And that's pretty good. I'm just a bit short on this edge, I think. That's better. That's just the sound of the rubbish truck coming around getting the recycling you might have heard there. Be gathering up all my beer bottles by the sounds of it. So I open the back door, roll the leatherette round the edge. Now I'm just pushing at this leatherette to make sure that it's trapped underneath that edge on the body there. Which leaves a tiny gap at the hinge end, at the catch end, but that won't be at all visible. It just makes for a neater fit at this point. That looks good. There's a bit of a dirty line there. I'm just going to wipe that. Just to remove that dusty mark. Alright, so we have our leatherette on the front, on the base. That's all good. It's all nice and square and level. The last piece of the puzzle for the camera body is our little Kodak sign. And since we were so careful at getting it off without having to apply any undue stress, it's nice and flat. It's not buckled up and doesn't show any stress marks. You can see where it has to go. There's obviously a big hole at this end, so that's never going to glue. So I'm just checking to see where I do need to apply the adhesive. And it's this end. And I'll lay that into place. That's good. And it just needs a little wipe because I can see the surface is a bit dirty looking. Oh yes, I know what that'll be. There we have it. So our camera body is all finished at this stage. Oh, and check that self-timer, I suppose. You haven't heard that run. Take the lens off, you might even see the action. You heard that self-timer ran very smoothly, no hesitancy. Nice, exactly as they should go. That's a very good example. Right, well the camera body's dealt with. Apart from a bit of a last wipe over, make sure all the finger marks and things are taken out. That part's done. And the next thing I need to do is turn my attention to this lens. Now this lens, as I say, it's not of the same vintage as the camera. It's probably come out much later. Possibly about the time the Reflex 3 was on the market, I would say at a guess. By the time the Reflex 4 came on the market, they'd pretty much dispensed with putting the rangefinder coupling on these lenses. Now looking at this lens, mechanically it seems good. The focus feels a bit dry, but it's quite smooth. The diaphragm, it's very slow to return. That's not a big issue with a rangefinder camera. With a reflex camera, you need those blades to snap down to the set aperture straight away, instantaneously for all practical purposes. For a rangefinder camera, that's not an issue, because you set the aperture and then you compose and take your photo. There's no further action needed for the blades. They just stay where they need to be. The glass, the front glass here is very dusty and dirty. I can see a fingerprint on there. I don't know how well that'll clean. That's certainly something that I'll have to discover, I expect. So to the lens. I'll get my bits and pieces together. Right, see about getting this lens apart. To start with, I need to remove the cone from the front here in the centre, then lift out this filter ring here, or lens hood ring really, from there. That will expose the 3 screws holding the lens capsule into the focus body. So let's see if I can get this conical section loose with a friction tool. It felt like that popped. Yes, it did. Just wind that the rest of the way out with a toothpick. And this piece comes off. And here we have the lens. 3 screws visible here. Now the first thing I notice that this screw head is damaged. Means that that either happened during assembly or someone has been very clumsy when they've serviced the camera or serviced the lens, because this lens didn't necessarily begin its life with this camera body. I suspect it began its life with a Retina Reflex 3. Took those screws and washers out, make sure I've got the correct count. 3 screws, 3 washers, that's what I want. And the lens capsule should fall out of the body now, and it does. So I can inspect the lens capsule. The helical here runs very smoothly, but it feels quite dry. That'll need to be cleaned and lubricated. The action of the diaphragm I'm interested in, because as I said, it was slow to react in the body, but that actually moves quite freely there. So it's not the aperture or the diaphragm itself that's the problem, it was more the control rings in the mount. I'll put that lens to one side, I know it needs to be cleaned. So here we have the body. There are 4 screws, we're going in from the back, there are 4 screws. I can see that they're locked with lacquer. This has got quite a yellowish look to it, that's lacquer on there. There may or may not be some on those ones that appear to be clean, and this one here's got a spot of red paint on it. Typically done to help you pick the spot to line the camera up, the lens up when you're fitting the body. And you can see there already is one red spot, it just doubles up on it. It's an easy thing to do, and it can be helpful. It can also be a great disguise. If you've been clumsy when you've been taking out a group of screws like those 4 there, you may damage one of them. Now if you've managed to damage the head on one of the screws, that screw has instantly selected itself to be the red one after that, because once it's covered up with red paint, and when the job is finished, any damage you've created won't be visible. So keep that in mind where you have a group of identical screws and one of them's going to be given a red dot to identify the correct location. That's an ideal place to put any damaged screw. That's our 4 screws from the back. Lift off the back. So here's the back of the mount, and here we have the cam for the rangefinder. So there's 3 screws and little hold down plates that keep that in place, and we'll need to remove those and clean all that stuff up. Now we have the componentry here, the control rings and so forth. And I can tell that felt sticky just pulling it off. So lift these off in order so that you can put them back in order. I'll zoom you out. This one here, there's 2 springs in here, two long springs. Take note of which one has the heavy spring and which one has the light spring. This one has the heavy spring, which is now just jumped off for good measure. We'll keep that over to one side. Then we have this pointer. Underneath it we have this component. Underneath that we have this separator. Underneath that we have the other pointer, which has the finer of the two springs on it. All this is quite gummy. It's got two. It shouldn't really have much in the way of lubricant in here at all, if any, but it's got, what it has got is very sticky. Now we're down to it. Typically that little fine spring stays on that post. It's easily damaged, it's not worth the fight to try and get it off. We have a retainers here which hold the scale, focus scale ring to the body. These lenses often differ a little bit in their construction. Screws are tight. This has got quite a long segment here, and I'm going to only remove the screw from one end. The other end's got the post for that spring. I don't want to remove that because I'm likely to damage that spring in the process, so I'll leave that intact. But I can take out these two screws and pull back that bracket. If I swing this end out of the way, with luck, I should be able to pull this apart, and I can. Right, so in here, I want to clean all these areas. There's got a old grease and dust and dirt in there. I want to get rid of all of that, have that all nice and shiny and clean before I put everything back together again.